Upgrades.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another JVS movie review brought to you from the Toronto Film Festival. This film here was my favorite film from the film festival, and it caught me off guard because this film has possibly the biggest gimmick humanly possible to get people interested in the film. And this one is called Better Man, and this is a quick synopsis. Better Man is based on a true story of the meteoric rise, dramatic fall, and remarkable resurgence of British pop superstar Robbie Williams. This is directed by Michael Gracey. Again, it stars also Robbie Williams, Steve Pemberton, and Alison Steadman. Now, the biggest catch of this film is that for some odd reason, and it's kind of explained when the director and Robbie talk about it, is Robbie made a decision to be a giant chimpanzee in this film, CGI. Because when they were sitting down talking about the film, that's how Robbie described his emotions. How his kinetic energy was like a monkey. And then the director and him came up with the idea that, maybe that would be a good thing to do in the film. And we go along with it. And while it is a huge gimmick and a huge risk to do this, they do an amazing job with CGI in this film, with Robbie played by a huge CGI monkey, of still depicting so much heart, so much emotion, and so much trauma in this film. As you're first introduced to a young Robbie Williams, as we see from a kid his admiration for his dad, who's also a performer, and how they would just sit around watching performances on TV. But we also get to see his relationship with his mother and his relationship with his grandmother. And those relationships kind of shape exactly who Robbie is as he goes through life, as his dad decides one day to leave the family to pursue his dreams of being a performer. And we get to see just how that weighed on Robbie, that he made that decision. And we get to see that Robbie always wanted to be great. No matter what, he had no idea, humanly possible, that he wouldn't be great. He constantly pushed this idea. And we get to see his perseverance in this film, from joining Take That at a young age, and then going off solo and everything that looked like being with another huge music superstar at the exact same time from the British pop scene. But the other aspect we get to see of it, and what makes this film extra special, is that Robbie battled not only drug and alcohol addictions, he was depressed for majority of his life. When he got the level of fame he thought he deserved, it all came with depression. And he didn't know how to cope with that. And because he did not know how to cope with that, we get to see not only the hard work, but we get to see exactly what happens when you are just falling apart and the world doesn't care because you're famous. It is a heartbreaking story to tell here with Robbie Williams. And I think that's partially the reason they could have went with the CGI chimpanzee playing Robbie Williams. Because if this was another human actor, I don't think this movie would be watchable. It is very depressing at times for everything that Robbie went through, but they do an amazing job of just not only using the CGI chimpanzee, but just also different elements of CGI work and special effects in general to convey at times what Robbie's emotions are, and how he was at most times his worst enemy and worst critic. This film does an amazing job at highlighting that, along with Robbie giving a great performance. Granted, the performance is possibly most likely with the little green balls on him, because that's how you do CGI monkeys. But nonetheless, it's still an amazing performance here, anchored by amazing directing, amazing soundtrack. Again, if you're not someone who's 100% aware of Robbie Williams, or you're someone from the US and you got introduced to him in that late 90s, early 2000s pop boom, where we were looking for everything humanly possible to do with pop artists, and it helped him cross over to the US because he was already a huge star in the UK. Like, if you didn't know that, or if you still don't know most of that story, you can still be intrigued by Robbie's story because you understand just how famous he was. We understand just how successful he is. But at the same time, again, it just gives a real depiction of you getting everything you asked for and not knowing how to deal with it. As Robbie struggles this entire film, but these are real struggles. It feels like an extremely scary Hollywood story of exactly what can happen when you get what you want if you're not prepared for it. And we see from the beginning of this film, Robbie was never prepared for the level of fame he thought he wanted. And when he gets it, we see the downward spiral. We see just how destructive he was with his family, how destructive he was in his relationships. But nonetheless, he managed still to push through and make some amazing music during this time frame. And that's, again, another element of the story that keeps you so intrigued by Better Man. This is one of the best looking films I've seen this year. One of the best looking films I've seen in a year. One of the best performances I've seen this year. Granted, again, it's a giant chimpanzee, but the performance is still great. Like, it's so many elements of it. The only gripe you can possibly have with it is that gimmick of him being a chimpanzee. But I also think that's needed because this film is so heavy that you need to lighten it up somehow, and the chimpanzee helps lighten it up. Because as we see it multiple times in this film, when Robbie was on stage at some of these just amazing performances that he put on, and we get to look in the crowd, and we get to see his depiction of his literal demons coming to life. And it was just multiple hymns attempting to kill him on stage. And it's kind of a sign that, not being prepared for the fame, understanding that your demons, no matter what you do, will always follow you until you can get rid of them. And this film does a great job of depicting that for Robbie Williams. And again, it just does a great job of telling his story in a very unique way. Again, between this and Piece by Piece, which are Piece by Piece is a documentary film, but it still feels like a film. Better Man is a musical biopic. These are two depictions of two great people, and then you get to see them done in unique ways. This is one of the most unique films humanly possible. And it's kind of surprising they pulled it off as well as they did. To me, this is the best film of the year because it's the best directed film of the year for me. And the performances are great, but this story is gut-wrenching to watch. This is not something that you can go into lighthearted to watch, to me. Again, if you don't know who Robbie Williams is and you were just to watch this film, you would think this whole story was made up. Because there's no way that someone went through the things that he did. But when you realize this is a true story, these are things he actually went through in his life, and yet he still came out on the other end extremely successful, extremely everything. But he always used his ego as protection. And then we get to see multiple scenes where that ego breaks and how Robbie responded to it. Those scenes are gold. And there's a lot of that in this film. So, Better Man, brought to you from the Toronto Film Festival. Out of a possible 10, I'm going to give Better Man a 10 out of 10. This is my favorite film of the year. I cried, I laughed, I did everything in this movie. Like, this movie is awesome in its depiction of Robbie's life with all the emotional aspects into it. Like, you get to see everything. There's no hiddenness to anything that Robbie went through. And I think that's highly important when the subject matter and a director can have a close relationship, and that subject matter says, if I'm going to tell my life story, you need to tell everything humanly possible. And here you feel like you are encompassed in Robbie Williams' world, and you get to see everything, the good, the bad, the extremely ugly. All of it is shown here. That's what makes this the best musical biopic in, I can't even say countless years that I've seen. But check it out when it drops. Let us know what you think. This has been another JVS movie review brought to you from the Toronto Film Festival. Peace, people.